Hey, what's happening? Jeff Pish here, back for another installment of the Beat of the Week. Today, we're going to check out a funky kind of groove that stems from basically a snare drum pattern. So let's get right to it. This is actually a groove that I used way back in the late '90s. It was inspired by a bass player that I was working with at a time in a band called the Lunchbox Heroes. Got to check those guys out. We're not around anymore, but that was super fun. My dude Johnny Myers came up with this cool, funky, like slap kind of bass thing, and it was for like an ending segment of a tune. It came out of a drum solo and into this funky groove that we kind of set up together. So Johnny's bass part, I'm going to play a little clip of the actual recording of the tune of this little portion, just a little piece right here. So check that out. So you can kind of hear it's pretty funky in there. So it feels like there's a lot going on. It feels pretty busy. It is a little busy, so probably too busy, but that's just the older me talking. But we're gonna break it down, and it should be a gateway for creating your own types of things. So if you take a look at the page, I'll put the page up here, so you can see the print version. I didn't write out necessarily what sound sources are happening in there, but I wrote out the pattern that we're utilizing. So a lot of times you can use, your rudiments that we all know and love. Use your rudiments to your advantage behind a drum kit. So I took that beat that Johnny created on his bass and found different accents and patterns in there and worked out what is essentially a snare drum pattern. Flams, we got some flam accents and inverted flam taps in there, as you can kind of see by the sticking, and it kind of created this groove. So I'm just going to start with the snare drum part. So you got flam accent, flam accent, flam accent, flam accent, and then the turnaround on the beat 4 is those inverted flam taps. So here it is, down tempo just on a snare drum on that pattern. We're at 80 BPM right here. 1, 2. And actually, I'll go ahead. I'm going to give you the downbeats now with the hi-hat so you can kind of hear where those downbeats relate within that pattern, because we're playing 16th notes in a quarter note feel. So here's that. And that's basically the gist of the whole thing. It's just using those flam patterns to create something cool and groovy. Even just by itself on the snare drum sounds kind of nice. That's a little funky. You can make a snare drum groove out of that and apply some different things. But now what I did though is, for this particular song and this situation, I added a kick drum part that kind of offset some things and gave it that funky feel. So we get the 1 and 2 and E, or E, I should say. And it kind of flows with and in between those accents that are in there. So let's go ahead and add the bass drum part. This is something like coordination wise, it could be a little tricky, so take it slow. You can read it on the page and see where everything lines up. But here's the idea. Again, I'm down tempo here at 80 BPM. So let's check that out. Snare drum pattern with the bass drum part. And I'll keep time over here. super funky already. Super funky already. And we're just, these are just the building blocks. Building blocks. These are the pieces. One thing to kind of think about is using flam rudiments like this in grooves. And, once we're going to get into changing up the sound sources, but using these flam accent ideas can create some really cool. What we'll eventually hear is the ride pattern parts. These are things, if you listen to like Jojo Mayer, a lot of the stuff he does with that drum and bass stuff is, if you really dig into it, it's different flam patterns, up tempo, and it sounds super, super funky. He's incredible. So check him out if you're not hip to that guy, because he's one of the best in the business, clearly, my dude, Jojo Mayer. But it kind of opens ideas. So you can experiment with different flam patterns, on your own and come up with some different ideas. Hit me up in the comments if you have some cool flam ideas of your own that you've come up with that have worked out for songs that you've played. And while I'm talking here, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so yet. It's always great to see new faces popping through on the notifications. But now let's continue. So we got snare part, funky bass drum part. We're keeping time here. Now let's change up our sound sources. So I'm going to put the right hand on the ride cymbal and keep the left on the snare drum. And I'm just going to play the hands. Again, we're just playing that pattern, but now the hands are on different sound sources. Now it's a completely different thing, but it literally stemmed from that basic pattern, that basic flam pattern that we worked out. Now when we change up the sound sources like that, it just creates this cool vibey groove funky thing. So keeping it down tempo again. Now we're going to add our bass drum in. Pretty nice, pretty nice. So it feels, it doesn't sit very well at this slower tempo necessarily, but that's what we do to work it out. Work on it nice and slow. Make sure you're getting your strokes in there properly and you're in control. This is, again, it's everything in drumming stems from stick control. So this is just basically a version of stick control exercises. That's really what all the rudiments are different stick control patterns that we learn to, add to our toolbox to pull from as needed. So let's go ahead and bump the tempo up and start getting this thing moving a little bit. So we're going to 98 BPM here. Just the snare drum, just the pattern. Now we'll split the sound sources. So now we're getting somewhere. Now we're starting to feel something. It's got some nice movement to it. It creates these nice ghosties on the snare drum because of those inner beats of the flam accent rudiment, and creates this cool little funky thing. Now we'll get it up to tempo here. We're at 112 BPM. It feels pretty nice right about here. Let's check it out. And there it is, super funky beat, just based on our rudiments and our flam patterns. And again, it's all about exploration. Try different things, try different flam patterns, and separate. Work something out on the snare drum or the hi hat or whatever, your pad, practice pad, and work out a cool flam pattern that you like. And then separate the sound sources, change it up, put the your right hand on the ride, put the right hand on hi hat, put it on a tom. Move the left hand to a different source. And experiment and really explore, your different colors. And then you'll probably find some kind of musical situation that you'll be able to use that groove, or that, it could create a fill. You could turn, a flam pattern into a cool fill. That sounds interesting. But really it's endless. It's just about having, again, it's about the toolbox. As musicians, we have, all of our equipment, drummers especially get this box of rudiments that are very important to check out. It's funny, I had a conversation today with another drummer friend of mine, great dude, killer player, Matt Galletti. Shout out to my dude. But we talked about, it's the importance of rudiments. I mean, you got to have it. It's super important to work that stuff out, to develop stick control, and that will then transition you to be able to do a wider variety of things around the kit. I think it's super, super important. It's absolutely helped me be better behind the kit by coming up, learning the rudiments and doing all the marching percussion type things. I mean, I think it's just been a big help when I get back here. So at any rate, there's our beat of the week. Nice funky little flam pattern. Work out your own flam patterns, check them out, try some different experimentation. Let me know how it goes. Drop me a comment. And hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and I appreciate you, and we'll check you on the next one.